Hi readers, welcome to Novels with Nat. Today I'm going to do a book review for a book by an author that I have a very much love or hate relationship with. More often hate than love, if I'm honest. And so why do I keep picking up her books? I don't know. But nonetheless, that author is Freida McFadden, and today I'm going to talk about her newest release, which is The Intruder. So like I said, I have read a lot of Freida McFadden's books, not all of them. I think I have 4 more to finish her backlist. And by and large, I don't typically rate her books very highly. The way I describe it is I don't like her books, but I enjoy them in the moment, if that makes sense. They're just palate cleansers, they're quick reads. They just sort of get you out of a slump, and they sort of if you come out of a long book or a really dense book, I just will read a Freida McFadden book and it'll be a 2.5 star and I'll just move on and it'll just kind of refresh my reading, if that makes any sense. Um, of her backlist, I have enjoyed the Housemaid series. I really do like that series. The third one was not the best, and the novella wasn't that great, but the first 2 books I really enjoyed. And I also enjoyed her novella, The Widow's Husband's Secret Lie. It's like a satirical novella, kind of making fun of the popcorn thriller genre, and I just loved it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was just perfect. It's like making fun of the typical Freida McFadden tropes, and just having it been written by herself. It's just, I thought it was entertaining. Besides that, I have not really enjoyed any of her other books. If I'm being totally honest, I think the highest I've given any of her other books would be a 3 star. They typically range somewhere between 2 and 3 stars for me. 3 is like the absolute max. More often than not, they're a 2 star. But I think that there is still room for an occasional book where you know you're not going to love it. You know you're going to forget it the minute you finish reading it, and you will never recommend it to anyone. But it's just what you feel like reading at that moment in time. And I find, especially if I'm coming off of a really long book, I just want a quick popcorn thriller that is going to be completely forgettable, but is just what I feel like reading and just binging in one night kind of a thing. I also really do use her books more so as audiobooks on in the background if I'm doing something else. From going on a walk or cooking or cleaning or whatever, just throwing on a Freida McFadden audiobook that requires 0 brain power to understand is typically how I use her books. She releases a lot of books, and so I did a book review of her last release, The Tenant. I'll link that down below if you're interested. And so I figured, why not do it for this release, The Intruder. The day that I'm filming this, it is October 9th. So this book came out on the 7th. So I finished it in about a day and a half, and I thought that I would just come on and record some of my thoughts before I completely forget the book. The book is already leaving my mind as we speak, so I need to get these thoughts out quickly. That's how fast her books come in and out of my mind. So let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on Freida McFadden as an author? And if you're sort of like me in the sense that you don't really like her books that much, but you continue to read them, what is your reasoning or rationale? Do you kind of agree with me that even though you don't necessarily like the book or think that you're going to enjoy it, that you still want to read it because it's just a palate cleanser and it's a quick read? Or do you sort of, once you got to the point that you decided you didn't like her as an author, did you just kind of stop reading her books? I'm curious. Because for me, I feel like if I'm reading a book that I really do want to read and I'm really excited to read, I want to be fully focused on it. I want to sit down with the book and just read it. And I feel like that's never the case for me with Freida McFadden books. And so if I'm doing other chores, I would rather have a book, like an audiobook on in the background, and a Freida McFadden book is good for that because I don't really care so much about them. And so it's not like one that I really have to be sat down and digesting and focusing on. And so that's kind of what I do with her books. They're more so like background noise type of books, which you need every once in a while. So, all right, let's get into the review. I've been babbling for quite a while. So I'm going to keep this spoiler free. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I know it's a brand new book and people are probably going to want to read it that haven't gotten to it yet. So I'm going to be pretty vague with what I'm talking about. I'm just going to speak sort of broadly about the things that I liked and didn't like. In terms of writing, plot, all of that. So first, let's talk a little bit about what this book is about. We're basically following our main character who is living in a secluded house in the middle of nowhere. And one day in the middle of the night, there is a young girl that sort of shows up, and she is holding a knife. She's covered in blood, and this woman decides to bring her into her house and see what's going on and if she can help her. And so we're following that timeline, and this child is sort of like not wanting to answer the questions that she's asking and is not being super cooperative. And so things start getting a little bit creepy. And then we're also following another POV, which I'm not going to get too much into what it's about or the storyline, but we do have sort of a dual POV story going on. So we'll start with what I liked about this book. I did enjoy the sort of claustrophobic, spooky sort of atmosphere of the book. I love books that have that atmosphere of like there's a house and then there's somebody like an outsider that comes to the house and just weird things start happening. I feel like she's kind of been trying to replicate that feeling when we had the housemaid that was really successful, and then she tried to replicate that, I feel like, with the Tenant was kind of similar, her last release, and then this one as well, with having a house and then there's a tenant that comes in, or in this one we have an intruder that comes in. And so I do enjoy that sort of cozy, atmospheric, claustrophobic type of book. So I liked that. I also have to say that I am always a fan of the sort of like creepy kid trope. I tend to love those type of books. So that was fun. It's always fun to have like a creepy kid trope going on in a book, especially a thriller. The other thing that I like about it is the same as what I like about most Freida McFadden books, is that they are very, very, very easy to read. You can sort of only have half of your mind on the audiobook and your other half of the mind on something else, and you can still completely understand everything that's going on. And so that's always good to have when you need that. And so this one was like all the others. It was very easy to follow, very easy to understand, and it wasn't like, you know, you're not having a ton of characters with a ton of plot points. It was very simple, very basic. So that was pretty much the things that I liked about the book. And now let's talk about the things that I didn't like. So having said that it was a very simple book to read, this one for me read very young adult. And I think it's because we are sort of following a younger child and we are getting some chapters from the child's perspective. And I think that that made it read like a young adult book, which I didn't love. I think Freida McFadden's writing is already very much like simple, and so when you have a child's perspective, it just makes it even more simple, and it got a little bit too simple, if that makes sense. Like it read like a young adult book to me, which I wasn't super fond of. I'll also say that while at the beginning I was interested and I was intrigued, I felt like once we get to about the halfway mark, it started feeling like it wasn't really going anywhere, and it really slowed down for me, and it just sort of felt like a really repetitive cycle of the same thing happening in both of the storylines. And so I started to slightly lose interest towards the middle. But I think the thing that I disliked the most about this book was that it was, at least in my mind, I found it very, very predictable. And I feel like now, with Freida McFadden especially, her books are so formulaic in writing. She follows the same formulas, has the same tropes, uses the same red herrings, and once you read about 2 or 3 of them, it makes all of the rest of her books very much predictable and obvious as to what's going on. And I definitely found that to be the case with this one. I would say there were like 3 main twists in this book. 2 of the 3 I thought were very obvious. One of them I didn't see coming. So I did enjoy that one twist that I didn't see coming. But the majority of the twists that were supposed to be like the big reveals, I feel like if you've read a few of her books, you will see them coming from probably like the 20% mark. And there is one specific twist that Freida McFadden does so often. It feels like it's almost in every, if not every other one of her books, this same exact twist. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm over it. Honestly, I'm sick of this twist. I think it's lazy writing. I think it's been done 1,000 times. It's unoriginal, and you can see it coming from a mile away. And I just don't like it. I'm over it. As soon as I can sense this twist coming in her books, it's just my eyes start rolling immediately. And I'm just like, okay, here we go. Another one of this twist. And that was the case with this one. So yeah, I did not like that at all. All right, so that is the things that I liked and didn't like. I'm just going to keep this really short and really vague because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. So now let's go to my rating. I was going back and forth on this one. I was originally going to give this a 2.5 star, which is typically, I usually rate her books about 2 or 2.5, just kind of straight down the middle, nothing special, nothing great, but also not like a terrible 1-star book. And this one, I decided to round it up a little bit. I think I'm going to land, truly, it would be like a 2.75, but I don't really rate books that specifically, so I think I'm just going to round it up to a 3-star. It's a very generous 3-star, a little bit of a stretch of a 3-star, but I was going to give it 2.5, and I thought, you know what, it's not, I didn't hate it as much as a lot of her other books. I didn't hate it as much as I hated The Coworker or The Teacher or The Tenant. Those books I really didn't like. This one wasn't as bad. And so I thought, 3 stars, all right, we'll give it a 3 star. It wasn't terrible. It was okay. It was what it was. It was enjoyable for the time, but I would probably never think about it again, and I probably wouldn't recommend it. The only thing I would say is that if you're a person who loves Freida McFadden books and that you find them shocking and twisty and you don't predict the endings, then I would recommend this one because it's definitely reads like all of her other books. And if you like her other books, then you would definitely like this one. I would also recommend it to people who are new to thrillers. If you haven't read a lot of thrillers, you probably won't be sort of looking for this trope that is overdone and this sort of twist. And so it probably would be shocking to you. And so I think Freida McFadden books are good for people who are new to thrillers, but also they're good for people who specifically are obsessed with this sort of popcorn thriller style of writing, which I'm just not generally. But I think for anyone outside of those two groups, I wouldn't recommend this book at all. But I'm glad that I read it. It was fine. It served the purpose that I was hoping for. I was expecting it to be somewhere between a 2 and 3 star, and that's what it was. And so my expectations are met. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going into a book knowing that it's going to be a 3 star at most, because there's nothing wrong with a 3 star. Not every book that you read has to be a 5 star or sort of is going to be your favorite of all time. But sometimes you just feel like a book that is just, like I said, quick, palate cleanser, popcorn thriller, just something to reset your reading. And that's what Freida McFadden books are for me. So I will continue to pick them up. I don't ever really buy them. I more so will listen to the audiobook through Libby, through my library. I just don't feel the need to hang on to them. I think with Freida McFadden books, she tends to go for quantity over quality. She releases like 2 to 3 books a year, it feels like. And I feel like if she just focused on like one solid release a year, maybe I would enjoy them a little bit more, but it feels like she's just turning them out as quickly as she possibly can, and there's not much thought that goes into them. I could be wrong. Maybe she's putting a lot of thought into them, but that's just what it feels like to me, and I'm not super fond of books like that. I really like more of like well thought out, well plotted, well planned thriller with a lot of character development, a lot of atmosphere, and I just don't get that with Freida McFadden necessarily. But I will continue to read her books, and I hope I've explained clearly enough why that's the case. I don't know if it even makes sense as to why I continue to read from an author that I don't particularly love, but hopefully you get where I'm coming from. Let me know in the comments if you have read The Intruder, what you rated it, what your thoughts were, and if you haven't read it, let me know in the comments if you plan to read it. So I'll link below my review for The Tenant, her last release. That one I think I did more of like a reading vlog, so definitely check that one out if you're interested. It is spoiler free. If you could subscribe to this channel, that would be awesome. Leave a comment, like the video, anything like that would be very much appreciated, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye.